we are. Our campus courses are up for the rest of the year. We're going to take a look at week 1 for this week. If you have a packet, it should be the same thing in the packet this week. It's just a paper copy, okay? So right now I've got my Canvas course up in the English Arts tab. I'm going to click here, 7th grade. Scroll on. Week 1, 20. Let's find out a few things page quick. Right here. Called immersive. If you'd like the page to be read aloud, you can click that button and it'll read it to you. I don't love the page. I don't think it sounds very nice, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to you on the page. It is there. Next. You hit the next button. It's going to do. So, all you do this week is the awareness page. That's it. Hit the button. Next. 7th grade week 1. Reading closely for text and text exact whole. Over the next few weeks, will be series of text images and more. Connected. You need to use your close reading skills. Those connections are. We'll examine text and ask you guys an idea how supporting details help it. How to navigate this page. For each section, be sure to follow the steps listed. Documents are listed in blue. They appear automatically on your screen. But if you click the blue link, you can download your own copy that can be saved to your computer. Then you can type and highlight on the document or print it out. So that's if you want. So these are kind of like where you'll do your work. So if you click on a blue thing, it'll pull something up, okay? Task or action steps are in purple. Student tasks will have you submit work or enter a discussion. Others simply have you reflect on your own. So if you see something in purple, that means you have to do something, okay? All right, we're going to look at learning goals first. Students learn what it means to read a text closely by attending to and analyzing textual details. It's a little confusing. So here's what I want you to know. For this week, what they want you to do is you're going to ask and try to answer questions before, during, and after reading to get a better understanding, okay? Those questions that you're going to make up yourself, okay? We do have some that will help you, okay? But those questions help you find details, okay? It gives you an idea of what you're searching for. Then, students will analyze visually based text. So you're going to practice the skill of you asking questions and then you trying to answer those questions, right, to find the details. We're going to practice that skill looking at pictures, okay? So there are 3 parts to this week. First, the introduction, where I'm going to show you what types of questions you can be asking. Then we're going to look at images to help us practice those skills, and then we'll actually practice those skills on a text. 1, introduction. There are many jobs that require close reading and guiding questions. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I want you guys to understand when I ask for a close reading, you're not just going to skim through it. Okay, you're going to take some time with it, right? You're going to ask questions before you even open that or you read it, you're going to look at the title. You're going to stop and think to yourself, what do I already know about this subject, okay? This takes time. This is what good readers do, okay? So we're not just reading the text. We have to do more than just read the words. And we're also going to practice guiding questions, okay? And those guiding questions are what's going to help us not just read the words. They're going to help us actually try to understand what we're reading. A musician might ask herself, how do the sounds of various instruments work together? The crime scene investigator might ask, what evidence suggests how the perpetrator came and went from the scene? If you don't know what a perpetrator is, that's a person they think who committed the crime. These more general questions lead the experts to then ask specific questions directly related to the object of investigation. For example, the general question considering the perpetrators coming and going might lead the investigators to notice a set of muddy footprints. She then might ask, what are the size and type of the shoes that left these muddy footprints? Experts ask these questions so that they can clearly understand what they are studying and can clearly communicate their understanding to others. Task. So this is something you have to do, right? It's in purple. Brainstorm at least 2 other jobs where you need guiding questions to get more information. I'm going to do one for you, so you only have to do one. Okay? I'm going to set up a little situation. Okay? Hopefully, some of you watched the NFL draft last week. Okay? There's not many other things going on in the sports world, but there was the NFL draft. So, before that NFL draft, right, a team has to come up with a plan of who they want to draft for their team. Okay? So, I'm not sure exactly how this process works, but in my mind, I'm going to think, right, we're going to have a meeting. We're going to set up a meeting so that we can discuss who we want to pick. So, in your head, you can choose your favorite team, think of your favorite team and think of maybe like their coaches and maybe a few really good players coming together at a meeting to help pick these players, okay? So you can maybe picture the head in your meeting, right? So we open the meeting and here's my guiding question to the meeting, right? So this guiding question, the first question I ask is going to help our team choose the best draftees that we need on our team. So here would be my guiding question. What are our team's strengths and weaknesses? Do you see how that question is broad? Okay, I didn't even focus in, I didn't even mention anything about draftees, right? In order to pick a good draft pick for our team, we need to think about, what is our team good at and what are we maybe not good at? If we have a really strong offensive side and we have a great quarterback, would it make sense then for us to pick the top quarterback of the draft? Probably not, because we already have a good quarterback, right? Let's say our defensive end, though, isn't that great, okay? So I will probably then come to the draft and try to pick good defensive players. So do you see how my guiding question, what are my team's strengths and weaknesses, that broad, big question, helped guide the meeting to pick the best draftees that could benefit our team? Okay, so what I want you to do now is I want you to pause this, and I want you to think of another job, or if you want, you can set up a situation kind of like I did, and think of a guiding question to open that, okay, to help lead your investigation, right? The investigation here was picking new draft or new team members, okay? All right, we're going to move on here. Get to know the tool. As we read and examine each text, use the following handout to help focus your thinking. The questions in each row are general, but can help direct you to key evidence in image or text. Look over this handout as we'll be using it several times. Okay, I'm not a huge fan of this handout. I think that it's a little overwhelming. Even, as your teacher and as an adult reader, I was a little overwhelmed by this. So I made us a simpler one that I think is easier to follow. So we're going to be using that. If you would like access to this document rather than this one, Ms. Smithman posted on her blog, and I'll make sure I leave in the comments a link to where you can find this, okay? So if we look at this, right, we broke it up into 3 parts. Things you need to do before you even read the text, things you need to do while you're reading the text and things that you want to do after reading a text, okay? So we're going to start at the start. And to help me better explain this, I'm going to use an example, okay? So I have the book right here, but I have some pictures up on here too, okay? But just so you know, I do have the book with me. So we'll start at the start. Why? Why am I reading this text? Some of you might be like, I'm reading this text because my teacher's making me, right? But I would hope that when we pick up a text for enjoyment, there's a reason there, right? I'm reading this text because I want to learn about other people's perspectives. Okay? So this is, well, and you'll see why this would be a different perspective from my perspective as we get into this, okay? But that's why I'm reading this text. So now we're going to take a first look, I call this. So this is, we've got our book, right? This is like when you're in the library and you pick up that book. You're not gonna start reading it, right? The first thing I don't do when I pick up a book is I don't go and read the first chapter. I like to look at it. Look at the cover, look at the back. Maybe I read the inside title. Maybe I just kind of flip through it. There's some nice pictures in this one, okay? What is the title? One Last Word. Who is the author? Nikki Grimes. Okay, what type of text is it? If I look. Oh, can you see that? It's poems, okay? So I know that it's poems. We're going to skip that. We're going to say, when was this text published? It was in 2007, okay? But she uses older poems, which is kind of cool. So she takes old poems and makes them new. So I'm just kind of getting a feel for the book right now, right? I'm just kind of like, this is also really good, though. These kind of questions help you when you're looking at a news article, right? But we're going to go on to this part, asking questions, okay? And this is still, right? We're still doing all of this before we've even opened up the book, okay? This is there's 4 things when you're looking at a book that we can focus in on. We can look at structure, we can look at the ideas, we can look at the language, and we can look at the perspective, okay? There's a lot of questions here, okay? But what I'm just going to do right now is I'm just going to kind of take a look at the cover and the back page, and we're going to start to kind of maybe figure out what this book might be about and ask some questions before I open it, okay? So we're looking here. I'm going to focus in right here. Wisdom from the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm going to so this is actually one of the questions here too if we look at ideas. What do I already know about this topic? Well, I do know what the Harlem Renaissance is, okay? The Harlem was a neighborhood in New York City that was an African-American community, and it was and in that community, there was a flourishing of like really intellectual ideas and a lot of art. There was a lot of African-American-owned businesses that were strong, and this happened because earlier, the slaves were freed in the South, and a lot of them moved north. Okay, and so they in New York they congregated in Harlem, and there was just this flourishing of really beautiful art and new ideas in that neighborhood. Okay, and as we can see on the cover, right, it's all African Americans, okay? So I can assume that when I read this book, am I going to read from the perspective of, someone who's white or someone who's Hispanic? Probably not, right? We're going to read stories from the perspective of what it's like to live in Harlem or even in America as an African American. If we look at the back of the book here too, we can just kind of read, thought-provoking, timely, innovative, and powerful. These are some of so she features poems from other poets from the Harlem Renaissance, okay? So I'm getting kind of an idea here, right? I know, like I said, I've asked these questions. What do I already know about this topic? Okay, perspective. Who is the author's personal relationship to the topic or theme? And if we actually read in the front cover, we can start to get some of those ideas. Okay, but we know what kind of perspective I'm reading from. Let's see here. Okay, we're going to get a little bit into this, right? But we can look at how does the author structure the stanzas, lines, paragraphs, because that's really important in poetry, right? The structure of the writing. It's not like what you typically see in a normal book, right? Paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Poetry is set up in a certain way. The way it's set up has a meaning, okay? So let's look then at some of the poems, okay? So we kind of, right, we're starting to get an idea, okay? So I read some of these questions, I answered some of these questions too. What are some other questions I have, right? What stories am I going to be told, right? As I read this, okay? Is it going to be about stories from long ago or today? Oh, right. So let's look. I'm going to pull a section here from the book, okay? So this is called Cubicle of Champions. And right away, even before I start reading, I noticed something interesting about the way these poems are set up. So you see it's all aligned to the right of the page, which is kind of not typical, because I would say typically we left align our writing, right? We notice that the words on the end of each line are bolded, okay? This is because she used a certain type of poetry. The author of this book, Nikki Grimes, took old poems from the Harlem Renaissance. So I'm going to pull this back up. So she took a poem that she took poems that really inspired her, and she would use those poems to inspire her writing. So if we look, here's an old poem, if you can see this, by Clara Ann Thompson, okay? And the word she uses here in bold, so she has this whole poem here, but this first line, I'll read you that first line, says, we live, and how intense is life, so full of strife, so full of strife, so full of hopes, so full of fears. Oh, joy and sorrow, smiles and tears, and oh, how fruitful is the quest, unless we're striving for the best. She took those words and she ends each line with that poem. So if we read this, we live, and how intense is life, so full of stress, so full of strife. So she actually took that poem, and in her new poems, she ends each line with the word from that earlier poem. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now, we're going to get into some of this, okay? We're going to read some of these poems, okay? So this first one here is called Jamar. The evening news never spares us. Tune in and we hear. If you're a boy and you're black, you live with the target on your back. We each take it in and shiver, one sharp bladed question hanging overhead. How long do I get to walk this earth? The smell of death is too intense, and so we bury the thought, because the future is ours. We get to choose. Well, we choose life. So this is then, we can say, what words cause me to see or feel? What words do I know? Don't I know? So that was the first one. If you want to take some time here, maybe think about those questions, right? What author or what words in that poem caused me to see or feel? I'm going to do that. I'm going to move on to the next poem here called Diana, okay? Stupid is the word that stalks me. I'm anything but. So I seethe inside. Even on a good day, I'm full of anger that burns my breath. Why? It's all because of my diagnosed dyslexia. Ask me to read aloud, and I stress. Whenever the teacher calls on me in class, I stutter. So, most folks surmise that my head is hollow. Actually, it is quite full. My words and letters simply switch places. They've got a mind of their own. I call that reason enough for stress or strife. I connected with this poem because, right, I have I have a diagnosis of dyslexia as well. So words that stood out to me, right? This word stupid. I have felt that before. So that caused me, maybe not everyone, but that caused me to feel, right? I feel that. I know how she feels, feeling stupid in class, right? That stress of when the teacher's going to call on you to read. Okay, so that language stands out to me. Okay? So as we would read these poems, we would go through some of these. And right here, too, I just made a connection. I made a text to self connection. That reminds me of a time. That reminds me of a time, right, when teacher called on me to read in class. And I could hear the kids in the background snickering at me when I would stutter, right? So as you would read these poems, you would ask more and more of these questions, right? After each poem, you can kind of stop and pause and go through some of these questions as we read. And then at the end of the book, we would try to analyze it, right? So why is this information or ideas important in these texts, okay? What section of the text was most challenging for me to read, okay? What does the text leave uncertain or unstated, and why? So as you read text, those are good ones, okay? That's what good readers do. So I'm going to stop there, okay? I would just take some time, right? Look over this sheet, and then in my next video, so if you want to, you can do this. You can keep working through it. You can just watch my second video, or you can start it again. Tomorrow, we're going to actually use this skill that I just went over, right? Asking these questions before, during, and after reading to analyze this text or these pictures and then this text, okay? All right, thanks for watching.